illustrated. If you didn't sign on the way in, please do so before you leave, so I have a record of who is here this evening. We'll start the meeting. Sylvia, if you'll lead us with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I can remember back in 1966 in Sylvia's math class doing that very same thing with you, Steve, and I.
I got a classroom here.
I'd actually like to make a motion before we get started that we add an item to the agenda that we inadvertently left off. The Riverwalk people are here and they want to speak, and my motion is to include them on the agenda as item number 8, and then we'll move the numbers down subsequently.
That's a motion. Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. 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 The motion is approved, and that item is added to the agenda. We've changed the agenda a little bit for the last couple of meetings, and the public comments part, which is really other business for the public, is up front now. We surprised Sylvia with it last week, and she wasn't prepared at the beginning of the meeting, and then she fell asleep when it was her time to comment at the end of the meeting, and we moved into executive session. Things moved very quickly because of that.
Every story isn't true.
No, you don't want to ruin a good story with the truth. That's for sure. So this is the portion of the meeting now where if there's other business brought by the public, we will address it at this point. Is there any other business to take care of at this point?
Sweeney House,
What's that?
property Sweeney's.
Yep. Why don't we, I haven't had a chance to discuss this in executive session with the board, Rich, so I think some of it we probably should be discussed in executive session before we have a public discussion of it. So what I would do is, let's see what's here. I think we should entertain a motion to further amend the agenda to include an executive session relative to real estate negotiations.
I'll make a motion to amend the agenda to include an executive session for the purpose of discussing real estate negotiations, the disclosure of...
Well, we don't need to get all that
Okay, good.
In the agenda part.
Motion's made.
So motion to include, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye. So we will include an executive session. Unfortunately, it's going to be at the end of the meeting. Otherwise, if we go into executive session, it leaves everybody sitting here with nothing going on. So if we go through the normal part of the agenda, we'll then go into executive session. May come to consensus on the issue, but the action, there won't be any public action at that point, but I can notify you as to what the decision
Notify
is.
me too.
What's that?
I'd like to be notified.
Well, this is, it's still in negotiation
gonna
executive
bring it up.
session. This is relative to the Sweeney property
Yeah,
purchase, and you're
Right.
not part of that transaction.
I thought that.
So
it was
there's
settled by now.
portions of this that are still not resolved. They need to be taken care of outside of the public meeting process. And once it's resolved, everybody will know what the decision is. But I'll bring Rich into the conversation after. And that would be just a direct conversation between one member of the board and Rich.
Oh, you're not gonna, it's not gonna.
There won't be an action taken. I don't want, so, in the public meeting at this point. But
No, but I mean, after the executive session has concluded and people are still here to hear what you say, you're not gonna have anything to say.
unless we're ready to, okay, if If the board comes to consensus and there's something that needs to be transacted in the public meeting, we could do it, we could do it at the end of the meeting, that's true. So there's a potential for that, okay? Public comments, anything else under public comments?
I don't know, I didn't read the agenda,
Well,
but
then
I
you're-
do have a concern that I want to bring up, and that's the removal of trees in regards to the property across from Stewart's, the brick house property. I guess there's gonna be a psychiatrist or somebody like that in there, it's gonna be an office building, that's what I heard by rumor. I didn't have any time to check it out, if that was true or not. But they took down at least 12, maybe 14 trees in front of that property. And I personally am concerned about that. I'd like to know more about it. Maybe I'm jumping to conclusions, but as I recall, those trees all look pretty damn healthy to me.
Those trees are on private property, and I'm the tree warden.
Yes, I know.
And my jurisdiction is only on publicly owned shade trees. And so those are trees that are within the road right of way. And I can give approval to remove diseased or trees that are unsafe. But with healthy trees, I have to hold a hearing in order to remove healthy trees.
Well, that happened overnight.
But it's on private property. The town doesn't have jurisdiction on it.
I didn't even know if it were in the village.
That is in the village.
It is in the village.
Yeah. Yeah, so the approval for the use of the property would be under the village ordinance, and we wouldn't be involved in that.
Yeah.
As town tree warden, I would be involved in public trees in the village also, but those are on private property.
But my concern is that I don't want to see properties raped like that. Personally, I don't know if we can do anything about it, so I'm bringing it up as something to be concerned about, because I think, trees are part of Vermont.
There may be one other person in the room that remembers the extremely high hill where Shaw's is now, with a punch bowl with a maple sugar shack at the bottom, lined with mature maple trees, and that all got taken down, and that hill went away. And I felt the same way about that as you do about these trees.
Well, that is a new development. This was not a new development. It was a new ownership on the property that was already
And again,
established.
it's in the village jurisdiction, and we don't.
Yeah, well, anyway, I think it's something that we should look into personally, and I wish we would take some action rapidly in terms of what we can do to preserve what we have as a village. With a lot of green trees.
Bill, go ahead.
Typically, that comes under the jurisdiction of the zoning board and the DRB. When people present site plans and they have to show all their plantings, and, presumably they had a site plan quite a while ago, and so that's the avenue to pursue, whether that was legally done or not.
Well,
So,
And that would be taken up with the village of Manchester, who has jurisdiction.
Yeah. well, anyway, so that we don't have any future surprises, I wish it was. I already talked to Tim, chairman of the Development Review Board, on that. And I don't know, he might have looked into it and realized that it was in the village. I haven't, and they're not meeting again until August. They're not meeting in July.
you can contact them first.
Huh?
You can contact them first.
What do you mean?
The village has a zoning addition.
Has the zoning.
Oh, yeah, I will go up there. Yeah, I will.
Okay, I don't want to get a conversation going back and forth and
No, I know, I'm
please,
sorry.
we got a lot of people here, we'll address our comments here to the table, and then if we have to defer to someone else for an answer, we'll do that. Don't make me use this gavel. Anything else under public comments? Hearing none, we'll get on with the agenda. Agenda item 4 is to approve the minutes of June 27th.
Move to approve. Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. One abstention. minutes are approved. We have liquor licenses. Do we have any liquor licenses this evening? Okay, we're moving right along. We're all the way up to agenda item 6, which is discuss vehicles speeding on Highland Avenue. There have been several complaints from residents of Highland Avenue about speeding, and they're represented here this evening. I see a few. Because we received those complaints, we have done some research and put together some data relative to traffic and the speed of traffic is traveling, and the chief has that information for us here this evening. So to lead us in, Scott, what probably start with the residents.
Right, we should.
Yeah.
We've had, like you said, a couple complaints, and so they wanted to address the select board about it.
Yeah, is there a spokesperson for the residents, or are you just here in attendance?
All individually.
Yeah, okay. Does somebody want to speak to the?
Highland Avenue has been a cut through for a long time, just to avoid the center traffic and whatnot. I have been noticing more speeding
I'm
now.
gonna stop right. I'm sorry to do this, but if you could just each speaker identify themselves.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Further.
I'm Debbie Douglas, I live on Highland Avenue.
Thank you.
And the speeding has become really unsafe for all the residents that live there. Whether you're trying to pull out of your driveway, you have small children that live on the street again that can't even play in their front yards. They have to play in the backyard because the cars go way too fast. Just people biking, walking, everybody just, everybody's talking about the speed of the cars. We now have a new development going on at the end of Highland Avenue. Where they're going to be putting in 8 new units, which is going to increase more traffic. Which, we can't stop the traffic, but I think we can do more about the speeding as far as enforcing it. I understand that Manchester's 42 square miles and we only have 9 police officers. We're not going to address, just Highland Avenue. But I think when they are there, if they would write a ticket or two, it would go a long ways in letting people know that, we're not just going to give them a warning and they're going to go off again. And my other idea was maybe to put in speed dips. I know they have them on Franklin Avenue in the village. I thought about speed bumps and people said, no, that wouldn't work because of the snow plows. I know they do have the speed bumps you can put in that are removable, that we could remove in the winter for the snow plows. But speed dips I thought would be maybe an option. And I'd also like to have maybe some lineage put on the road. Coming up over Fowler Hill, you take your life in your hands on that hill. Everybody's just kind of riding down the middle of the road, and there's nobody knows who's coming over where. I walk down there daily, and I can't tell you the number of times cars have just come flying over the hill on the wrong, almost on the wrong side of the road. And I don't know if it's just because they just don't have no regard for anybody. It's really become unsafe.
Yeah. There's a microphone,
Oh.
I believe, that picks it up for the Zoom. Maybe it's not on.
Kyle on the Highland Ave. So I was here 16 months ago, asking for you to construct a sidewalk down Highland Ave. And it was also brought up how dangerous East Manchester Road is, and you guys agreed that the town should do preliminary engineering and design for different alternatives on how to make the road safer, both Highland Ave and East Manchester Road. And so it came out of that meeting, a group of us, Jeff Williams, the town engineer, former planning administrator, and John O'Keefe, started working together on actually doing that. But as soon as we were about to get kicked off, he left, and no one picked up the work since, and that was a year ago now, or a little over a year ago. So what I would propose tonight is to actually commit to doing several different alternative preliminary design and engineering scenarios on what you can do with sidewalks, with different slowing traffic mechanisms on both Highland Avenue and East Manchester Road, and actually commit to doing those alternatives. And I would further ask you to commit, once those alternatives are done, to pick one and apply for federal funding to get 80% of that funded and commit to a local match for that. There's dozens and dozens of programs federally that will fund these very specific projects. It just requires the desire to actually do it. So, and I will say the comments on speed bumps and dips, those are helpful. I will say the reason we need to do the planning and initial design work is because there are many different alternatives that you can do for design to slow it. So one example is a speed table, which is plowable, it's much longer, and it forces cars to slow down, and it's much safer. But you wouldn't know this unless you were in engineering or you did this type of work or you worked in that industry at all. So I think no matter what you do for enforcement, sticking a police officer there, that's okay from time to time, but that's not a long-term solution, and there actually needs to be money and effort, and people actually want to do this, put this forward and do this. So I would ask you tonight to put forward several design alternatives and fund it to do design and engineering work for both Highland Avenue and East Manchester Road, and then commit to putting a local match and applying for federal funding for 80%.
Judy McGraw, I live on Beach Street. I like that idea, and I think we need to do something on Beach Street, Barnville, High Meadow, all of which have the same issue. And I can't begin to tell you how many times walking on Beach Street, I have had to jump in the ditch to avoid being hit by a car. 9 out of 10 times, a drunk driver, somebody who is speeding because they're coming from the club. A lot of them are intoxicated. They've been drinking at, playing golf, and then they go and have dinner. It's really become unsafe out there too. And now we're getting it paved, it's going to be a raceway.
My name is John Joplin, my wife Carol, and I live on Highland Avenue. I'm on the Barnville Road and Highland Avenue. And I just want to reiterate the seriousness of the road traffic on Barnville and Highland. The stop signs on Barnville Road really aren't observed. It's sad. I'm up my yard a lot. There's a lot of people rolling through the stops. There's a lot of people not even slowing down at those stop signs. And I've seen a couple of near misses. People come off of Barnville Road doing 35 or 40 miles an hour, go around the turn onto Highland Avenue and keep right on going. And come from the lower end of Highland Avenue up to the stop sign on Barnville, and again, don't stop at all. It's a really dangerous intersection. And I'm not sure which is worse, Barnville Road or Highland Avenue, but they're both highly traveled, not recognized in terms of speed limits, and those stop signs aren't recognized at all. And so I'm trying to live with it, but at the same time, when you see a dangerous situation, I think a couple of people walking who have literally had to step off the road or get off a bike and move to the side of the road because somebody's just coming up either Barnville onto Highland or Highland onto Barnville, going way too fast, not paying any attention whatsoever. So it's really a serious situation.
My name is Highland Freeman. I live on Highland Avenue between Spruce and Elm, down the bottom of the road. You may recall my porch because it was taken out by a speeding car in October of 2020, which is a non-experience that I want to repeat. So they feel like there's some resistance to putting paint on the road, putting a line on the road because it is too narrow to be a two-way road. There's only 2 of these 19-foot rods across, whereas neighborhoods have to be 3 rods across. So it is not, there's no way to make Highland Avenue safe for two-way traffic. I have noted on my porch, which we rebuilt, that there is a lot of pedestrian traffic going up and down Highland Avenue. I don't really know where they're going from or where they're going to, but they won't go past the house. So there's people there who need a sidewalk and who are in danger, being hit by these speeding drivers. So I would like that to be a one-way road uphill, at least from Spruce to the top of the hill. I don't think people should be coming down the road because there's no visibility over the bridge. I think a sidewalk would be a wonderful idea. If we could squeeze one in.
Anyone else want to speak? It's, public, yes.
Matt Prendergast, live on Highland Ave. My wife and I have 2 young kids. My daughter is 7 and our son is 3. And we live on that road. You often see us up and down that road biking most of the time. Son now just learned to ride his bike. And it's always a difficult thing to manage for us as a family, whether or not we're actually going to go and ride our bikes on the street or not, or even walk. We typically stop well short of the hill and turn around because it is dangerous. The cars do come over that hill really fast and you cannot see coming up. So we typically walk around, to go to town, go and walk down the hill to go that way. So I think that, I don't know what the solution is, but I think that there's a lot of different really good ideas. But something of the sort needs to happen on that road.
Hi, my name is Penny Summers. We don't live on Highland Avenue, but we live nearby, right on Main Street, kind of across from where the Manchester Nursing Association First Shop used to be. And we have an incredible speeding problem there. It's a straightaway, nobody slows down, they're passing. We have Northshire Day School there. We have the Third Shop and Nursing Association. There's people pulling in and out, and it's really very dangerous. We need something done there as well.
On the other half of the job, please. I have a horrible time getting out of our driveway. When I back out of our driveway, whoever is stopping at the stop sign on Barnumville, making a right, will T-bone me before I'm out of my driveway. I don't know how they get the speed from Barnumville to our driveway, which is just a few feet. And it's ridiculous. Then the cars that are coming up Highland, especially pickup trucks, come up Highland, make a right on Barnumville, and if they aren't doing it right, they lose their load in that intersection. We've heard trucks drop boards in that intersection because they aren't coming up and going right properly. And then when you're at Barnumville, the speed between Barnumville and heading down towards the Heritage site is horrendous. I'm glad we don't have a driveway on that side. Ours is bad enough, but it's kind of a joke intersection, so I would really like to see people get nailed in there. And they're welcome to sit in our driveway and do it.
Thank you. Anyone else from Highland who wants to speak, or any other street? Kyle is right. We did talk about this about a year and a half ago, and the discussion centered around, of course, the difficulty of the hill when it comes to a sidewalk. It adds exponentially to the difficulty of doing this. And of course, probably the only way to accommodate it would be to make it a one-way street at that end. Yeah, that plays well. Everybody doesn't mind the one-way street as long as it ends at their driveway. What we have to look at, and of course Judy brought it up, and Penny, every residential street outside of the very center of town, and this is true of all rural towns in Vermont, they don't have sidewalks. And we have a lot of sidewalks in Manchester in the commercial sector, and they serve a greater public need. And a sidewalk on Highland serves just the people that live there. I don't want to,
Sorry,
I don't
this is
want
not
to
true.
minimize that. Kyle, I'm speaking right now. I don't want to minimize that because it's important. And I hear universal concern, not just from Kyle, but from everybody here, about the traffic and the speeding on Highland. I want to listen to what Chief Owens has to say because he's got a lot of data relative to traffic itself. And then I want to make some observations. And then what I'd like to do is try to move forward toward some sort of solution based on some of the suggestions that you made. And so if the residents have made their discussion known at this point, Chief, maybe if you move up and just give us some of the data on the actual traffic flow.
I'd like to start out with just saying that I can totally agree with the residents. There is speed going on there. It is an extremely high traffic road. And I can tell you that because we have a radar speed sign on our facing south. So from that, we're able to extract some data. But I'm sure if you guys.
Thanks a lot.
Excuse me, officer, could you speak louder and turn the microphone on? I can barely hear you.
The microphone doesn't, if there is a microphone, I don't even know if there is. I don't see a cord going over there. It's only for the Zoom part of it, and
I get it.
perhaps for the TV part of it, but not for the people in the room. So we'll be very quiet and try to hear.
Chief, is this document available to the public? This is from our radar.
The question is, if somebody wants to read this, is it an available document for them to look at? It's been, I'll answer that question. Then for them to go out to the public meeting, yes, it's public document. At this point. So.
It will be on the website.
Yeah.
Can you summarize it?
Yeah, well, that's what we're working toward.
So what I handed out was, after I spoke with Debbie about her complaint, we pulled the data from the speed sign and broke it down, and what you have is just the data from January 1st of this year. I'll start by saying the number of vehicles that the radar unit clocked, 74,000 and change. And that's just in one direction. The radar is just picking up vehicles coming forward.
From January 2 to
January 1st of July.
74,000 vehicles.
Yes. So I would say you could probably double that.
The way you got opposite direction.
Okay. So it is extremely
More than 74,000 trips, I guess. It could be the same vehicle. Well, yeah, but people live there.
Keep going, Jim.
Still cars on the road. Maximum speeds, and I have the maximum speed for that time period, 62 miles an hour, well above speed limit.
Sorry.
Average speeds, the average speed on the road for that time period is 25 miles per hour. Broken down for the actual speeds. There were 2 vehicles that went between 61 and 65.
2 between 56 and 60, 16, 51 to 55, 43 vehicles between 46 and 50, almost 300 between 41 and 45, and 73,000 and change that were under 40, which is still, could still be 15 miles of this. So that's a lot of cars.
Isn't that on the main road?
Pardon?
Isn't that up on the main road?
It's on Highland.
I don't know.
Up on-
We have several of them around town. This is one.
And, Highland.
Since we put the car, or put the radar sign on Highland, April of 2022, 180,000 vehicles reported just in that one direction. So it's just what we're doing. High speed in that time period is 7 miles an hour. So there's a few. But hopefully this information, you guys need.
That is helpful, and I think it's a little bit of a leap from an engineering perspective, but that's certainly not from an observational perspective, is that the speeding is not the people that live on Highland that won't car. It's people that are using it as a shortcut. Well, somebody's disagreeing with that.
I think it's a presumption.
What's that?
I think it's more of a presumption.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, no, you're not proud.
We certainly have had neighbors who we know have heavily speeding on our road. I mean, I think it would be an incorrect assumption to say that it's others and not us.
So the speeding is universal?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to say it's all out of towners, it's not.
Oh, no, I don't,
But it's us, not just them.
I would say that and I'm one of them, the people that use Highland Avenue as a shortcut, when you're coming to my place on Barnville, you're going there 8 miles, you're going up to Route 7 interchange, that's my best route. I try to observe the speed limit through there, do my best to be at 25 or below. I do respect the people that live there, and I like to see people out walking and being a part of the community. But I certainly observe the speeders. Okay, I won't presume. I'll presume that it's universal. But the numbers.
I'm in favor of writing more tickets. Make it known that you're gonna get a ticket on that road or that intersection. You're more than welcome to hang out in our driveway. And,
Or you can take.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that,
I'll take one of
we're
those
hearing
radar guns.
that, and there will probably be more of a presence on that street. I love to intersperse the conversation with anecdotes, and I can remember about 30, maybe more than that, years ago, 2 very prominent residents down on River Road complained about speeders, and we set up speed traffic before your time, PJ, and they were the first 2 that got caught speeding and got tickets. So.
You got pulled over on the way to a select board.
I did.
Right on Barberville.
We moved on to this, and then
Sorry.
I saved it. You gotta do it.
Not so long.
Yeah, Steve.
I think that there are a lot of points that are well taken here, and I think that the BCRC route probably would be the best. But I think people need to understand what you all go through, sitting back there and visualizing where money is going to be spent to benefit the bulk of our taxpayers. And you gotta keep that in mind. I mean, don't forget the North Road either, because that's really bad out there.
And that's a major shortcut also. Bill?
I just want to throw this out, I'm not sure how it'll be received, but when you talk about infrastructure, and you alluded to it, is that gets to be a costly item. And maybe we should consider what I call a sidewalk frontage tax, that the people that benefit from it pay a small tax based on their frontage of property, that supports this type of infrastructure within the town and also helps maintain it. And that would include all existing sidewalks that can pitch in. I'm a property owner that has a lot of sidewalks, but I think a small bill, annual bill like that to support this type of infrastructure is something to look at, because otherwise, you're always caught with how do I fold a couple $100,000 project to my annual budget and not affording taxes. But if you had a fund set up like that, and then the people who benefit pay for it, and the others who don't benefit don't feel being penalized for it. Just a thought.
But if they have a sidewalk in front of their yard, they should be taking care of it in the first place.
Well, the other maintenance is the periodic
Taking care of
sidewalks
it.
have to be
Okay, I got
rebuilt.
it.
Yeah.
I got it.
We do have a lot of sidewalks in town because we are, for a town this size, we have a relatively large commercial core. And our priority, when I got on board a long time ago and continuing until today, the priority is to try to maintain the sidewalks that we have. We've added sidewalks as the development is spread out as part, a lot of it as part of the permit that was granted. That developer would have to build a sidewalk, but ultimately it becomes the property of the town, and we have to maintain it. I think we've kind of gotten our arms around the maintenance issue. We had a lot of really bad sidewalks, and most of those have been brought up, redone, brought up ADA standards. The village still has a lot of marble sidewalks, and they're really slippery. We had some here in Manchester. As much as we love marble in this valley, it may not be the best material for sidewalks, but that's still got to be a priority, and Steve harps on this all the time. If you've got the infrastructure, you have to maintain it. So that's where a big chunk of our sidewalk money goes. We don't really have a budgetary line item for extending new sidewalks, which plays into what Kyle said, to explore opportunities for grant money, which would pay for the engineering design, and then there's grants available for actual implementation. But there's still a contribution from the town, both in the initial expense of putting the sidewalk in, typically 20%, but then you have to be able to maintain it, which includes winter maintenance as well as structural maintenance. So all those would have to be figured, all that would have to be figured out. I think in order to move this along, we've heard, yeah.
Is there a charge going to BCRC?
Probably not.
We've used them before for this very same topic on a different location.
Okay,
Already since I've been.
if there was a committee formed, is it just disappeared, or these people are sincerely interested?
Yeah.
Obviously, we got a brain full of all these grant possibilities. That committee should be used, and they're sitting on a shelf somewhere, I think.
I worked in transportation for 15 years, doing exactly this type of stuff. And like I even sent Scott, when I was working with John Keefe, a prioritized list of safety issues across the town and where they're most dangerous. And it's literally just putting forth the effort to apply for the money to get these things done.
I guess if you sugar it down, it's
Well, I
much
mean,
simpler.
yeah, that's, I understand the ongoing costs and the 20% match. Like, I understand that. Like, that's it has to be understood.
But we have to start something.
Yep,
And we did start, it was a false start, as was pointed out, but I think this has brought it back to the forefront. And I think it needs to be considered in a larger context based on whatever they agreed this evening than just Highland Avenue. Judy?
Just a suggestion. My older son lives in a city. They're responsible for maintaining their sidewalk. Each resident, they have to plow it, sand it, repair it.
That's true here also. We have a sidewalk plowing device, and we do it out of the, as just a gesture, because we are responsible for some of the sidewalks in town that don't have a landowner associated with them, and it's easier for us to go through and plow with that machine. But the landowners, by state statute, And by local ordinance are required to clear the snow off the sidewalk in front of their, if you're a commercial property owner, clear the sidewalk in front of your business, do sand it, all that. That is in place in Manchester.
Well, why couldn't you do it with a residential area like Highland?
Because there be stretches, if a residential, if it's a 2-acre lot and it's, 100 feet or 200 feet of road frontage, you're not gonna get a resident to take care of that sidewalk. And where the distance between dwellings, distance between businesses, so forth and so on, the town really is the only entity that can consistently clear all that. So we do extend that service throughout the whole town, but from a liability perspective, it is the landowner that's responsible for the sidewalk as part of their business. Other comments? We're going to move this along. Jan, you talked about putting together a committee.
There is one that existed.
Is there a committee, Kyle?
It was me, Jeff Williams, former planning administrator, the town engineer who's on contract.
I mean, these are all people that work for the town, so they don't really have to form a committee. I think there are people to be roped in.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is talking to BCRC,
Yeah.
to do initial alternative engineering.
So I think that's a path we'll take. I mean, we'll get in touch with BCRC.
Yeah, Kyle, send me that list
Yeah.
next week, and so we have something to work off of, so.
Is there
Problem.
consensus? Yeah. I don't think there's anything that actually,
No.
not necessary to take an action at this point. I
I'll
think-
talk to them
Yeah.
and get them going forward, and then we can bring the information back to the next meeting.
Sounds good. I want to thank you all for taking the time and coming in and talking to us about this, keeping it civil, friendly like it should be in one neighbor. And we'll probably be addressing this at our next meeting in some manner. We'll at least get the ball rolling. Next agenda item is, thank you, Chief. The Shire's housing. There's a discussion about the potential development of the 3 townhouse buildings on Depot Street and the property that's behind it.
So you should have 2 letters in your packet. One is from the Housing Task Force, written by Jeff Hoffman, and in which they formally recommend moving forward with the Shire's housing project a little bit further. Then you have one directly from the, I think it's from Matt Moore who wrote that, titled Department Street Workforce Housing Proposal. So you have that on your other letter, which he addresses the project in the first paragraph of the description about the possibility of using land behind the town on 3 commercial buildings on Depot Street. I believe they're here.
We are, hi. Sorry, I apologize ahead of time for my voice, which is a little scratchy tonight. But hello, and thank you for having us this evening. My name, as I said before, is Kat Rogers. I'm the director at Shire's Housing. As I mentioned before, I was formerly at BCRC, and I was about to represent BCRC. But tonight, I'm here as half of a partnership that also includes Evernorth. That submitted a proposal for housing development on the rear portion of 301 Depot Street. I'm wondering, do we have the PowerPoint that we can pull up?
I don't have it.
You didn't get the link in your email? Okay. All right. That's okay. Yeah.
This is the proposal that was presented to the Housing Task Force, so
Correct.
it's more or less the same, correct?
Yeah, we just have some nice images to share with you guys. In fact, tonight was the night we were going to share with you guys some revised renderings or renderings submitted as part of our proposal to the town. And we had some new ones hot off the press for tonight, but that's okay, that's okay. You roll with how it goes, and tonight is just a conversation then. Maybe it's possible after this meeting if we can post that PowerPoint and then folks could see the images that we're going to be alluding to. Hey, if anything, this will probably make it a shorter meeting, which, you know, people probably don't object to at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Well, so as I said, I'm half of this team that's brought this housing proposal forward to the town of Manchester in response to the request for proposals, the RFP that the town published back in December. As you mentioned, we submitted our proposal back in February. We have arrived at tonight because the Housing Task Force, which the town appointed towards the end of last year, considered the proposals that were submitted for that RFP and have endorsed this proposal as the proposal that has the most merit to help meet the town goals for this town-owned parcel in town. Let's see, what we would ideally love to have tonight from the perspective of the development team, now that we've been endorsed by the Housing Task Force, we would really love for the select board to authorize this exploration of this proposal to move forward. Again, not green light the development, because that's not frankly how development works, but to really give us the green light, enter into an option agreement, which my partner Matt is going to talk about in more detail, which really allows us as the development team, just as it would allow any developer to spend really the real money and the time to do feasibility analysis to see if this proposal, as sketched out currently, is really viable and going to help you guys meet the housing need and mixed-use desire that you have for that site. Before I go any further, I just want to emphasize how excited we are to be able to make a proposal like this to the town of Manchester. Again, Shire Housing is the region's affordable and nonprofit housing developer. We own and manage over 400 units of housing. That's both rental apartments, but also shared equity homeownership homes. We own and manage those throughout the county between Bennington and Manchester. And I can say far and away the projects that we do, we always enter them in the true full spirit of full partnership with the municipality. We really see our role as helping towns meet the housing goals that you guys have, the economic development goals that you have. We're all aware, I think, in ways that maybe in the past we weren't, just how vital housing, accessible housing for a range of members of our community, how critical that is to our communities being able to thrive. So we just love being able to help you guys do that. And this is a perfect example of where the town has done so much upfront work to facilitate the development of this site. So it's kind of it's like our perfect dream scenario where we get to work with you guys and have a dialogue to realize the housing that will meet your need within the parameters of what's possible. So next I was going to show you guys a location map. For anybody who's not familiar, 301 Depot Street is on, of course, Depot Street, kind of between the Depot District and the double roundabout, so it's squeezed between specifically the Price Chopper Complex and the subway. There's 3 commercial retail buildings in the front and then a large parking lot in the rear. And Shire's and Evernorth's proposal is to develop 30+ units of housing on that rear portion of the site, the parking lot. Critically, and I was so excited to show this, again, if you guys could imagine the aerial of the site, there's Depot Street, and then there's Center Hill Road that goes up the hill towards Main Street and the cutoff to the library. A key part of developing this site is actually to create a pedestrian connector to help people cut through the site. So we really view, and we do this with all of our projects, how do we meet as many goals of the town in developing the site as possible? Of course, the first one being housing, but really a lot of other needs that can be realized. I'm just going to follow the flow of our PowerPoint as we have laid it out. Again, I'm the director at Shires Housing. Just gave you the overview of who we are and what we do. An example of some of our projects right here in town is Torrey Knoll, if you guys are familiar, and some of our home ownership homes are in East Branch Farms, just on the east side, a little bit further down Depot Street than this property. And I'll let my partners introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Kern Vanderweilen. I'm the Housing Development Manager at Shires Housing, so I'm part of the development team here at Shires. My background is in municipal planning and zoning. I was actually the Village of Manchester zoning administrator before this, so it's great to be back up here, and I'm super excited to be working in the Manchester area on this project. So that's a little bit about me.
Great. Hi, good evening everyone. My name is Matt Moore. I'm with Evernorth. We used to be Housing Vermont. Some of you might be familiar with that name. We were established in 1988. We recently merged 3 years ago with a sister company in Portland, Maine. And we're a community developer, and we specialize in financing, in developing workforce housing, affordable housing, downtown mixed-use projects. We've worked with Shires over the years. I've done a number of projects in Bennington. With them, it's been a few years since we've worked together, so it's exciting for me to be back and working with Shires. And a little bit about me. I guess maybe a little bit more than 25 years ago, I was the park manager at Emerald Lake State Park in East Dorset with the Youth Conservation Corps. So I got to know Manchester, a little bit back then. I was a lot younger, so when the opportunity, for this project came up, and we were talking about it in-house and with CAD, and in Manchester, and where's the site? Oh, it's this parking lot next to the Price Chopper. I was like, okay, yeah, I know where that is. So, we bring our shop. We're about 50 people between Burlington and Portland. We bring a fair amount of experience and expertise and project management and financing and so forth. And we're a nonprofit, mission-based community developer. So we build housing, and really kind of what Kat was getting to about communities, queuing up a project, communities that have a need, they've identified it, they have a site, they've done some work already in terms of the environmental, some site assessment and so forth. These are the projects that we love to do. It's one thing to just kind of parachute into a community and build an apartment building for workforce housing, but it's another to have a community that says, we need this for our economy, we need this for the people that live here, that want to live here, and then to put out an RFP for developers. So this is kind of my passion in terms of projects. So I'm really excited about the possibility to do this, right? And so like Kat said, is tonight, we're here to take that next step in a process that has been going on for some time now, and we would like to enter an option agreement to purchase the parking lot. And I shouldn't say purchase the parking lot, because actually what we're going to be asking for is the town to contribute that, to the project as a municipal. Give it to you? Yep. We're gonna make the ask, and we'll talk about it, and that's why we're here. And that is why we're here. We'll talk about other projects and so forth. I fully understand that that's an initial reaction. No, that's okay. That's okay. We're here to talk about that. That's why we're here tonight. So.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just jealous because Kern and Matt shared a little bit about himself personally, and I just have to say I'm so excited because I saw the little 1-month baby that's in here somewhere. I have a just under 3-month-old baby at home, so that's my life. I lived down in Bennington, lived there for the last 6 years. So as Matt was alluding to, there's, and again, this was going to be a little bit easier to see in the PowerPoint presentation that we had, but the conversation we're having tonight is part of just like, we'd look at a site map for the site itself, 301 Depot, what's kind of the site map for how we got here tonight. And really, this conversation starts back with the town's constantly ongoing planning process, right? But the most recent document being the 2017 town plan, which highlighted the vital housing need that the community is facing. Even that built off of a previous study that really highlighted the discrepancy between the number of people that work in the town of Manchester and yet the people that aren't in fact able to live in the town of Manchester and further contribute to the tax base by being year-round residents. And so the town plan in 2017 really highlighted that need also as it's connected to economic vitality in the downtown. Then in 2020, I believe that the mixed-use feasibility study for the downtown was the first document that really highlighted Depot Street for the town and the opportunity that that municipally owned parcel presented to help realize some of these goals for economic vitality, mixed-use development, housing that would serve a range of residents in the community. Last year, conversations really heated up around Depot Street. There was an ad hoc committee that was formed specifically around the site and how the town was going to use it to its highest and best use for the town. Out of that process came a number of documents that, as we were talking about, Matt and I, that really build into the investment that the town's already made to bring us to this point of how do we develop this site to get you guys what you want. So that included an appraisal for the site back in July 2022, preliminary site engineering assessment that was completed by MSK engineers out of Bennington, and a series of brownfields assessments because there is some brownfield activity on the site that needs remedying. So a lot of that was happening last year. There was even a conversation about do we bring the town hall back downtown to that site. That was determined at the time to not be the highest and best use of the site or town offices. But really I see that process as accumulating in the request for proposals that was put out. What does the development community see for the site? And let's hear from the development community. So that's again where we jumped in. We provided this proposal and it's been endorsed by the Housing Task Force, and that brings us here tonight. Just to highlight how then tonight's meeting fits into the development process for the site. As we've mentioned, ideally we get select board authorization and can move forward to develop in the coming weeks an option agreement, the details of which would be TBD, could be to be determined. That really allows us to do a lot of investment in feasibility over the summer. And that lines us up in the fall to be able to apply for funding and financing to be able to make this project happen. There's funding rounds, application rounds that only come up once a year. So basically, if we're not ready to do it this year, we wouldn't be able to do that again until the following year. We're in the spirit of, I think, where the town is coming from. There's been a lot of thought about this site and how to best use it. We would love to be as efficient as possible in moving that forward, given the feeling of consensus that there is around what this site can do for the town. From there, we would fully secure funding by next spring, which means that we could actually bid out construction components and potentially start construction in late summer and fall. That would mean that we could complete a project in summer or fall of 2025. That's the timeline that we would really love to pursue. And again, I just want to situate tonight's conversation and how that helps make that timeline possible for us. But we've mentioned a lot about an option agreement, and I know that Matt is prepared to give you guys a little bit more detail.
Great. Before I start to run through that, does the board have any initial questions or anything generally background? What is this, why are we here, so forth?
I think the only question I have, and you've been involved in a lot of these types of projects, is as I look around the room, I almost universally see people that, some of us were born here, but others that moved to the area, but chose, and maybe because that's all that was available, but as I look around the room, almost everybody here lives in a home on a piece of property, which is kind of the traditional housing workforce and any other level that we've had in Manchester. And this is a proposal that is built around the idea that people would want to live in Manchester in a more urban setting. And in your experience, is that something that's been marketable and used in other communities similar to Manchester?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that's a common, I guess, conception, right, that people have. And in large part, it's true that Vermont is very spread out, it's very rural. And except for when you get to those village centers and in downtowns and so forth. And we have, and I have worked on a number of projects all over the state, a multi-story, 2-, 3-story building or more in a village center with 20 to 30 or so apartment units, and they usually lease up pretty well. It's a mix of incomes that they're targeted with these apartments. So you have the rents are on a scale of affordability. So given the crisis we have in housing, in the state, the vacancy rates are so low. This is something that does work. And Kat, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I want to call attention to the fact Greg is back there clacking away on his keyboard, but he penned an article in the paper, was it earlier this year or last year? Sorry, you don't want the attention. About his experience trying to find that, idyllic home in Manchester that people have. It is interesting, folks that have been in their homes for a while sometimes don't realize if you were to go out today and try to acquire one of those homes, just how different it is even from, 10 years ago. I mean, much less just the difference pre-pandemic and currently. It's just not accessible for so many working families. I would include myself in that, having worked in the public and nonprofit sector today. Something else that's really helpful to know about the desirability of these units is that, there's an image that comes to mind of the urban young person that's biking and doing all of this. In reality, these units are highly desirable, yes, for that end of the age spectrum, but increasingly for the other end of the age spectrum, folks who have been living in those large homes with those large lawns that you have to mow or else it looks really bad and your neighbor's saying, you gotta get on that lawn. You can actually downsize and stay in the community longer if there are these kinds of units that are more affordable, in fact are required to be affordable perpetually for folks who are on. We have a lot of residents in our housing that are simply restricted income folks. So that includes, our older members of our community. So that can be helpful to kind of break out of what might be an assumption about who wants to live in these units. It's a whole range, and increasingly there's so many Vermonters that are aging out of their large homes that do, in fact, they also want to be able to walk to the amenities of their homes all the time. And so that's a big sector of our population that wants these types of homes.
And Kat, can I just add?
Yeah.
Judd Hoffman, the chair of the Housing Task Force, there has been extensive data provided to the Housing Task Force that shows exactly what Kat's saying, that the vast majority of houses are much larger than people need. 1- and 2-family households with thousands of square feet or 5-6 bedrooms, which is obviously not needed for a 1- or 2-person household. And so these types of households could more accurately meet individuals' needs there as well.
Yeah, I don't mean to extend the meeting or cover ground that you've covered with your committee, but it's important that we be on the same page and have this type of discussion at this level.
It's in the village center. It's zoned for high density, mixed use and residential. So this is what the zoning calls for. So,
Steve, do you have a question for the presenter?
I've got two. Did the Shires own Applegate and Bennington?
Yes.
They own it now?
Yes.
A high drug area and a high crime area. What do you do for it?
So
What's your
actually,
protocol?
Shire's properties and Applegate included have, you can talk to the police offices. Our properties have lower crime rates than other comparable rental properties throughout the county, and Applegate included.
So what is your protocol as far as putting people in these places?
I don't want to confuse what we're talking about here with subsidized housing or low-income housing. What we're talking about here is workforce housing, and our previous town manager used to always refer to it as, let's take a family where the wife is a school teacher and the husband's a police officer. These are the kind of people that can't afford to buy a place in Manchester, but they make reasonable salaries, and we're not talking about subsidizing their housing per se. There will be covenants that keep it perpetually affordable at a certain level that's affordable. But what's the threshold for workforce housing? It's we have it internal.
Yeah, that's why I'd like to clarify. You're hitting on a point, because I think North Shire projects, and I'd like them to clarify this, particularly working through Evernorth to get the grant and so on, they do have income limits, and they're not that high, and as a very large percentage of the, say, the housing population has to meet those income thresholds. So maybe it'd be helpful to put those on the table for, you know, what determines how people get into your housing and take advantage of lower rents, I guess.
I just don't want to see a drug house, that's all. That's my point.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, we don't either. I might propose, it might be helpful for us to run through our presentation, because I know that we've got, and it's not that we don't, we love the questions and they're great questions, but it might be helpful for us to make sure we get everything out, because we love the questions as much as you do, and so we're going with it. I'm reading myself in.
Trying to be conversational.
I understand.
You know, and, exactly, give you a chance to add something right off of that. So, the option agreement, right? So, we replied to the out of town, said we want to build workforce housing here. Town already decided that, right? Did a bunch of studies. And they put an ad out and said, we're looking for developers to build apartments on this site. So, any developer is not gonna go and...
Where did this come from, though?
Any developer, whether you're building $1 million condos or 100% subsidized or something in the middle, which is what we're talking about, any developer is not gonna go out and spend tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars, because that is what it will cost to get it designed and get it permitted and actually get to a construction closing and get to a construction start. You see the pictures with everybody with the shovels and the hats and all that. Hundreds of thousands of dollars to get to that point, okay? So in order for us to take the next step forward, right? This is like we're maybe step 2, step 3 in a multi-mile walk that we're gonna go on together on this thing for the next couple of years. We need to have site control, okay? We need to know that if we go out, and this is what we're gonna do, hire an architect, hire an engineer, we got a proposal, tens of thousands of dollars to do all the studies and do all the designs, environmental, appraisal, lawyer for title, all that stuff. We need to know that that is gonna be worth doing, and that property isn't just gonna go to someone else. That is normal and standard operating procedure. There's a lot of stuff that we're gonna get to that's not so standard in terms of some of the federal and state funding that's involved, but in order for us to take the next step forward, we need to have an option agreement. And that simply gives us the option to purchase the property, right? And when I say purchase, I say acquire the property and the various terms and so forth. And it's for a certain period of time, so we can go through our due diligence, right? So we can do our title work, we can do the environmental, we can work on the zoning permits, we can get a design and do those things. And once we get to a certain point, right, and we get the okay on some of those environmental things and so on and so forth, we say we want to do this project, we would enter into a purchase and sale agreement, which is a binding agreement that says, you're gonna sell, you're gonna convey it, I guess, and to us under these terms. And it's binding.
That was helpful, Matt. Can you, so is the option agreement binding as well?
It simply gives us the option to exercise it. So if we exercise the option's gonna describe the property. It's gonna say, the property is approximately 1 acre, and it's the parking lot behind the 3 commercial buildings. The town is gonna keep those 3 commercial buildings, right? And we're gonna have to figure out an arrangement for parking, how many spaces go with that, so on and so forth. So it's gonna say that 1 acre parcel, and the term, right, is we're looking at 9 months to give us time to go through all the stuff that I just talked about. And what was your question?
Whether it's binding or not. So it sounds like it's binding for 9 months, that you have the option to then exercise acquiring property.
We have the exclusive right to exercise the option.
The town can't go with anybody else during the option.
Correct.
Right, during that.
That's what I think we're trying to get.
We're not bound, we're not obligated to buy it, but no one else can buy it. It gives us time to go through the due diligence period. And then when we're ready, when we know we have our permits, and we have some sign-offs, because of some federal money, environmental review, NEPA, some folks in the room probably have heard those things. Once we get through that, we are allowed to sign a binding agreement.
And then are we required to sign that? I mean, that's, I guess, what I'm getting, whether it's binding for us is what I was asking.
We could exercise the option and the property could be conveyed under those terms, to us. But it's not how we operate. Some option agreements are very specific and detailed. This one is very general, and it's the purchase and sale agreement that is going to be more specific in terms of some of the performances. We're not going to take ownership of the property until, for example, it's fully permitted, until, we have our financing and so forth.
Does the option agreement that you're picturing have any stipulations of what we can do with the remainder of the property?
It would basically say the only real property that we're talking about is that 1 acre triangle. It would have an exhibit, and it's gonna, I'll have a marker, and I'll draw a triangle or draw a line around it, and that's that. And anything that we want to say about what is excluded in the relationship between what would be retained by the town and the subdivided parcel, we can totally speak to that. It's up to us how we want to craft this. Totally up to us.
There is one other way too. You could do an opt-out clause in there. So what that would mean is we sign this option agreement with them, giving them the exclusive rights for 9 months or whatever. But if the developer came along and wanted to buy the whole thing from us, we could still do that by reimbursing them for any expenses that they during that time.
Yeah, a big part of our concern is the ongoing maintenance and carrying the 3 buildings that we own now. And also leaving, if we make a decision on the back part of the property, leaving those buildings as viable entities. There was a lot of discussion about condominiumizing the whole parcel, 3 buildings separately, and then the parcel in the back is a separate condominium unit. And that might be a way to accommodate this also.
That might be the structure that we go site control with this option, then we're able and willing to talk to our real estate attorney, meeting with the zoning administrator and say, what is gonna be the structure to do this? Is it gonna be a subdivision or should it be a condo, structure?
I don't want to get too far off the path here, because the
Yeah.
suggestion has been that we get the presentation finished, and again, discussions, Steve, I know you've had your hand up, but let's let the presentation go now.
Okay, so, purchase price, we're asking that the town contribute the property, to enable the project to move forward. I've worked on similar projects around the state. I have one now in Windsor, on Main Street, a vacant property that the town via, Improvement Corporation, got a hold of. And for that project, we're building a 25 unit building. The town is retaining part of the parcel, we're subdividing it. They're not doing anything now, it's for them to develop later. It's gonna be easier to develop once we do ours. And they offered that to us, okay? And right, the part of the calculus here is, it's a vacant property right now. What are the property taxes it's paying? You know, is it bringing any revenue for utilities, permit fees, et cetera? So I like to think that it's an investment that the town makes in this to make this happen. And when we go to the public funding applications to the Vermont Housing Conservation Board, to the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, and we bring this project forward, and they see on our pro forma, this is a community project. The town put this RFP out. They need workforce housing, and the town is going to put some skin in the game and support this by providing the parking lot, that parcel, to the developers. That is massive leverage for us, and it greatly increases the chances of our applications and projects being funded.
And I'll just add a couple more points of what does the town get out of this site being developed. As Matt alluded to, some of the most expensive real estate in the town is empty parking lots. Because it's a lot of, for people that don't think about it, there's actually a lot of cost to upkeep just an empty parking lot. So turning that into property that actually generates tax revenue for the town is always an advantage. Taking that extra property away from those front sites so that the costs of running and maintaining, operating those front sites, it automatically goes down overnight because you're not also paying for the upkeep of all that additional property. As I noted before, there's long-standing brownfield issues on the site that have not been remediated. We would remediate those brownfield issues as part of bringing a project like this to fruition. And again, we always look with our projects to meet needs beyond the housing needs. So we would actually be providing public infrastructure, the example being that connector to Center Hill Road that would be accessible to the public, that would be maintained by us because it's our property, it's our development. But again, it's for the community to meet as many needs as you guys have identified.
And I think the focus needs to be on the need. When we talk about tax revenue, it was established many decades ago that the most cost-effective property to a municipality is open land, because the taxes paid on it and demands no public infrastructure. Residential infrastructure generates more need for support from the community than what it generates in taxes. Commercial is a little bit better in most circumstances, but it still requires more infrastructure than what it pays for. And industrial development actually paid more in revenue to the town than what it demanded in services. And I don't think that's changed much over the last several decades. So yes, it's important that it pay its fair share of taxes and that it contribute to the tax base, but there will also be children that go to school and demands on public infrastructure that will probably exceed the taxes that are being paid. So I don't want to gloss that over.
Yeah. So that's the summary of technical document that's maybe 4 or 5 pages. I think I floated a template to Scott and Gordon. That's really the next step. We're, after the planning commission made the recommendation for us to be developers, we re-engaged with the architect and had them kind of redesign the concept design from a 40-unit, 4 stories total to a 3-unit building, which I think fits into me better overall. We met with MSK Engineering and downloaded, they downloaded all, a lot of the information and work. Corinne and I had a great meeting with the environmental consultant at phase 1 and phase 2 to understand that. So we're starting to kind of mobilize, right? And as Kat said, the big funding piece is a tax credit funding from VHFA. I'm not going to explain how it works because it's not really that exciting, to be honest. But the bottom line is that it's highly competitive in the state. It's two plus applications in dollars for every dollar that they have. So 10 projects around the state are going to apply this year, probably 8 to 10, and 3 or 4 will get funded. The applications are due usually every year in February, and they have a board meeting in April. So that's what we're setting our sights on here with this project. Is for us, this is one of our 2024 projects.
And Matt, this might be a good juncture to have Corinne come forward. You were going to cover basically what are the rest of the permitting process, because again, we're emphasizing tonight is about green-lighting, continuing to explore this possibility, right? And there are additional steps, permitting steps, that are going to be a big part of actually realizing if this is going to happen or not.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So when we presented to the Housing Task Force, there were some questions about permitting, a little bit about what the actual input from the community is about the design of the building, et cetera. And so I thought it would be helpful just to run through some of the regulatory pieces that we'll then encounter once we've gone through the option agreement, once we've gone through some early diligence, when we have environmental work done, when our architect has finally put together elevations and the aesthetic design of it, and we finally have our site plan with our civil engineer. Once we've got all of that set up through the option agreement period, we'll then start entering into permits, essentially. And there are 2 different permits, categories of permits that we'll encounter. First are municipal permits. This is where the majority of community's input about the aesthetic design of the property, about what we're doing on the property will then come in. Essentially, whatever project you put forward will go through the design advisory committee here in Manchester Center and the development review board. And both will have to approve the project essentially, and that's where a lot of the public input comes from in terms of what the aesthetics are, in terms of what we're doing. We want this to be an open conversation with the community, as Kat and Matt have pointed out many times now. This is something that we want to partner with communities on whenever we tackle one of these projects. And we absolutely want your guys' input as we move forward with the design process and go through that permitting stage. So that's going to be an excellent catalyst to continue talking about the project even after we've done a lot of our due diligence and kind of initial design. So I just wanted to bring that out. And then the second category of permit we'll bump into are the state permits. The one that I really wanted to highlight is the Act 250 process. I'm sure everyone here has at least a cursory familiarity with Act 250. We believe that project would largely qualify as a priority housing project under Act 250, which would actually give us an exemption from the Act 250 process because we're designing a workforce housing project here in a community that critically needs that, essentially. The Act 250 process offers a bit of a challenge from a development perspective sometimes because it can elongate the timeline of a development project. In this case, we estimated probably add about 9 months to our schedule, so it goes from a 2024 project to a 25 or maybe even a 2026 project. And it can add a lot of cost. We believe that the Act 250 process would probably cost us in the ballpark of $150,000 or so just to go through. And all that assumes that there's appeals and everything goes smoothly, et cetera. So to the best of our ability, we'd really like to get this project qualified as a priority housing project. The only problem is that the parcel itself doesn't sit with the correct overlay from the Act 250 office's perspective. The town of Manchester has a neighborhood development area, projects like ours that sit entirely within that development area qualify, so long as they develop other categories, as priority housing projects under Act 50 and Industrial Consent. That NDA, the neighborhood development area, doesn't extend over the entire parcel, it extends over part of it, but not the entire parcel. And we already know that the Planning Commission, Bill, are working on a package of changes to kind of bring some of those parcels sitting in that area into the NDA. But we essentially would really lean on you guys to help bring that parcel in so that we can obtain the priority housing project exemption and move forward smoothly. So yeah, that's a little bit about the permitting process, some of the regulatory steps, and again, that's going to be a really excellent catalyst for more public input once we have something more definite kind of put on paper. And I believe, without the presentation, it's hard for me to remember how fast you're going to next, but
The design.
yeah, the design, there was going to be this moment, Freddie was going to come down, we were going to show you guys some concept sketches, but obviously we'll have to post those after the fact, and hopefully you guys get a chance to take a look at it.
They're even more teased than we anticipated. You'll have to look them up online afterwards.
Yeah, so we had some concept sketches drawn, some of the intention that we're putting into this. They're not by any means, final designs. These are very much back of the napkin conceptual things. But yeah, we'll make sure that that gets to you guys so you guys can take a look. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, quick hit on the design, and just to follow up on the NDA piece and how it relates to the option. I've seen this before, actually, a project in West Rutland, where they're making some zoning changes, expanding the village center designations and the downtown designations for purposes of Act 250, and you also get more access to state funding if you're in a designated area. And they hadn't made those zoning changes and hadn't made that change yet to the designation. And we're in the option, we want to submit the application, and the funders say, you can't submit the application until the changes are made with the zoning and stuff. So this is something in the option agreement, if we do this, I would like to put some performance dates in there to hold our collective feet to the fire, hold your feet to the fire, to adopt, to make the zoning changes that are necessary within a certain time frame, and then to have the neighborhood, NDA.
Neighborhood development.
Neighborhood, thank you. Neighborhood development area adopted by the state downtown board, ideally by the end of the year, because we need to submit our application in February. So there's some urgency to some of these things, which is good, because if we're going to do this, let's take those steps in the next direction. So with the design, as Corinne said, we're going to go through zoning, okay? We're going to go to the DRB. It's in a design review district. So we hire engineers and architects to do that. The concept that we floated around here to the board, what we're looking at is a single building with parking on the first level, the ground level. Most of that property is in the 100-year floodplain. What will, as is most of that part of town, and all the buildings that are there and have been there, and the town, the commercial buildings on Depot Street, those are on as well. So what we're going to do is put parking on the ground floor, and then we have two floors of apartments, so 15 and 15, so 30 units, and an L-shaped building. And we're thinking about the orientation with the price chopper on the side. We don't really want to face the back of the price chopper, so we'd like to orient our building towards towards kind of the center of the Starbucks and the little commercial area that's next door. And you know, we would have a nice orientation with a little bit of southern exposure. We want to connect it to Depot Street, which is challenged because we have 3 buildings in front of us. So we'd have, you drive in and park under the building, but we have an entry in the front and probably a pedestrian connection that would connect with those wide sidewalks that run through the buildings there. So that's the idea. We're looking at flat roof versus a gable roof. There's pros and cons on that, but again, that's what we would go through the zoning process.
So the critical path on this, with regard to getting an option in place and that sort of thing, obviously we're not going to do that this evening. And there needs to be discussion with our own housing task force along with our planning commission to see what needs to be accomplished and whether there's general consensus that this does in fact meet the needs of the town is something that we want to do. I think we're pretty deep into it at this point, and so question very, very quickly, critical path as far as putting together this option.
Yes.
I mean the time frame. When I say critical path.
Frankly, we had originally hoped that that might be squared away this spring. We're already into summer and frankly behind the timeline that would really be ideal. We can still do it now, but frankly, we would need for this to be in place.
So my suggestion would be the board needs to come to some consensus on this, and of course it needs to be discussed probably in executive session. If that consensus is reached, or when that consensus is reached, I think at that point we'd have town staff work with you to negotiate the terms of the option. And it could happen pretty quickly. The pieces that we have to really pay a lot of attention to are the pieces that we would have, the performance pieces. As you said, the town would have to put together in order to accommodate it from our zoning perspective. The state piece over which we have no control. I could see it happening quickly as long as there's general consensus.
Why does it need to happen quickly?
In order to meet the, people are going to be investing money in this, Steve, and people expect a return on their investment in a timely manner. And at the point that we tie up the property in an option, we're going to want that piece of it to move forward so that at the end of the 9 months we can get our property back, or we can take it and go on and become something else. But in order to meet a construction schedule, I assume this group is going to reach out, and there's going to be people that are going to be, there's a funding mechanism. I'm sure they have a conceptual idea of what it is. Those people are going to want to see what their money's doing. These things, time is an important piece of that.
And I might just add too about the option agreement, you know, us being on the developer side, we pointed out pretty strongly how we need that in place for us to be able to make the investments that we need. But I think you were alluding a bit to this, Ivan, that it also benefits you guys. I mean, it gives us a very clear timeline. This is your window to figure stuff out, if this is going to work or not. And when that lapses, you know, well then we had our shot, and then if, say, you know, there's circumstances outside of our control, and you guys want to extend that term, we can do it. But I just want to emphasize that the option agreement isn't all about, you know, benefiting the developer. Again, it's a mutual agreement. What do we all need for this to move forward, for us to have confidence that we're going to get out of this process what we all want.
Yeah, and when we, you know, you have a transaction where it's not with the municipality, right? It's just widow's property, and I ask for a 9-month option. They look at me like, you know, my hair's on fire or something like that. Yeah, it's a long time.
Oh, by the way, your hair's on fire.
It takes a long time to do this stuff and move through it. These mixed finance, there's public monies, there's private monies, and you know, if I were to sit here and say, okay, 3 months, we'll get through this stuff. I mean, you can't go out and hire an engineer, and you can't get an appraisal, you can't get a phase one, you can't do anything in 3 months. It's gonna take that time, and we very well, would need another, 3 months or something to get to that next stage. So, the schedule that we laid out that's the best case scenario. And sometimes that doesn't happen, but what we need is a commitment that we're gonna work together on this, right? Because that's why we're here. You guys have said that you need housing, and we're here to do it, but I'm not gonna come here and make a bunch of stuff up. It's not gonna be easy. It could take a while, but you go around the state, look at other projects we've done, and it's worth it.
And right now, there is a viable path to getting a potential building completed in 2025, and that's pretty exciting. Again, some of the factors that are going to build into that timeline are beyond our control, but there actually is a path, and again, it's just exciting. I know how long the town has been talking about this project.
So, Scott, in an effort to move this along, what do you see happening this evening? What do you see happening over the short term?
Well, you're already going into executive session tonight. Topic, they want to get a consensus out of that tonight, we can do that, or we can schedule that for the next meeting in 2 weeks.
Megan?
I don't know, the presentation's done, can we jump in?
Yes, of course, yeah.
Okay, it is incredibly exciting for the town to have a partner to actually get this housing built. We need it so desperately. In a previous life, I worked with nonprofit developers, and nobody could overstate how very difficult it is to make the numbers work, to get something built that is actually affordable, whether it's workforce housing or actually affordable housing. It's incredibly difficult to make the numbers work, so I strongly encourage this body to get the land, because we cannot, out of one side of our mouth, complain about how little housing we have and how unaffordable it is, and then out of the other side of our mouth, tell them that we're going to make it really hard for them to build anything that could actually be affordable for housing. So it is in our best interest.
We have a unique convergence of opportunity here where we came in possession of our own property, but regained possession of it just 3 months ago. And we're in a position to be having this discussion. So I think things are happening relatively quickly.
Well, we've been working towards this for a number of years.
2017 town plan, and before that even Steve Grunzik.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so I know there's a task force that came out of the planning commission, was it? That looked at, were there 2 proposals, is that correct? Do you guys know what the variables were that they looked at to make the determination that this was the partner they were going to go with? Because I think that, from my understanding, there were only 2 proposals. Probably would have been better if the town did receive more proposals. I understand why the vagaries of this and what makes it very challenging to develop. But the other question I have is, does this town, by giving the land away, and it improves the economics, but does that subsidize Evernorth and other projects that you do in other parts of the state? In other words, are we subsidizing your general portfolio of projects by, let's say, deeding the land without any, for $1 or whatever it costs?
No.
So, okay.
Very easy question to answer, no.
Yeah, each project is its own separate limited partnership that's a for-profit entity. Shires and Evernorth would each be a co-general partner, only 0.005% the managing GPs. The limited partner is basically it's a multi-investor fund made up of the banks all around us that invest in these tax credits. So each project stands on its own. We do get paid to do this. We get a fee for this, which enables us to do this. And we guarantee the construction contract, which is going to be $8 or so million. We guarantee lease-up. We guarantee delivery of all those units. We have an operating deficit guarantee. So the downside is is much bigger than the upside. So we're a nonprofit developer. There's no back-end deal. There's for-profit developers that do these deals.
This
in
is like the
different
Pub
states
product.
and in Vermont, yes, so that we are nonprofit developers. This will perpetually be affordable. We are not going to turn around in 15 years and sell it and have it be converted to condos. So we are doing this because we love it. Because it needs to be done, and we're nonprofit developers. So that's a fair question. That's a fair question. It's a great question. So.
To address your first question regarding.
A question I asked earlier, and I haven't heard in the presentation, what is the income levels that this project would serve? And then related to that, what determines the rent that you'll be charging when the project is done?
Right. So there's going to be a range of incomes that will be targeted for this. About 25% of the units will be available to people making 80% to 100% median income. Most of these, we're going to have probably mainly one-bedroom apartments, a couple twos, and maybe a few studios. 75% of the units are going to be affordable for people under 80% of median income.
And what's median income? What's your definition?
Well, it's not my definition.
So, yeah.
It's by county.
Right.
You know.
What's the definition you use?
HUD. Duh. It's HUD. They come up with the median income by county, and so the definition of affordable is paying no more than 30% of your income in rent. So they publish it every year in Bennington County. The median income is X. That means 80% of median income is Y, and 30% of that is Z. Therefore, the rent can be no higher than Z. And so I'll answer your question. Let's see, 60%. So 60% median income. That is actually the hard threshold for what will be about 75% of the units, which is $31,800 for a one-person household, up to $49,000 for a three-person household. So basically, under $50,000 a year. 80 to 100% median income is roughly $50,000 to $100,000 a year.
That's only for 20% of the units, right?
For 25. We haven't determined the exact.
Give or take.
But give or take, those are safe numbers. So the easiest way to think about it.
I'm going to have to stop the discussion at this point because by our own rules, the meeting ends at 9 o'clock unless there's an action taken to extend the meeting.
Motion to extend the meeting.
Usually it's like pulling teeth to get that motion.
Second.
Okay, motion in a second. All in favor, say aye.
I've never seen so many people excited about that.
But that also,
median
I don't know
income.
if that's it.
that also tells me that I need to keep things moving.
No, that's okay. No, I understand what you're getting at, but I will say this, that there's nothing in the zoning that talks about who can live in the town, right? You can't say, oh, you don't make enough money, so you can't live here. I've worked on projects in Woodstock, went to environmental court. Okay, their attorney gets up in court and says those people shouldn't live here. If they don't have enough money to live here, too bad. Stowe, Bennington. So I understand what you're getting at, and those are the numbers. Some of the units will have a subsidy to help people with rent. Okay? Some of those units will be a single person making $75,000. A lot of them are going to be the people that work in the service and hospitality and food industry that make this place home.
And, you know, it's apparent to those of us that are familiar with Manchester and the local economy just how much wage workers are needed to support the area's employers, to support all the businesses that we use and that we love. And when they're closed because they can't find employees and nobody showed up that day, or somebody was late because they had to move over an hour in New York, those are the people that we're talking about. We're also talking about with that one income of under $50,000, you know, that's potentially a school teacher with 2 kids. That's what we're talking about housing in these units.
Okay, so, anything else that you want to add in your presentation?
That's it. Thank you for letting us get through it. We were able to cover everything that we
All
wanted.
right, so the ball is being thrown to our court to get back. We'll get back to you relative to our receptivity to the option agreement. At that point, this becomes a negotiation among staff. So we need to discuss it in executive session, and we will do so this evening.
Appreciate your time.
Chrissy?
Yeah, I didn't know if we could make any more comments. I'm curious, you know, if you've ever built on a site that will require flood insurance and who bears the cost of that. This is, you know, an already tenant group that, you know, flood insurance is extremely expensive. It's only going up. So how have you ever dealt with that on developments before, and how would you see that working in the site?
Yeah, if we need flood insurance, we will get that. We have properties all over the state that are in the 100-year flood. Most every downtown and village center is in the 100-year floodplain. You know, and obviously what happened in the last couple of days. Yeah, we have some properties in Montpelier, in Barry, downtown on main streets and so forth there, that saw water. So, which is why we're putting the residential units up above. So, most of the good sites are gone to develop. So it's that is a challenge and a constraint on this site. Not gonna.
I mean, on that topic, I mean, that's one that the housing issue, absolutely, I'm all for, you know, working through workforce housing and all those pieces, but the town has available other sites. And so, an aside on that, I think it has to be about the people. I think it has to be about, you know, the site and the development. You do all those pieces, you put it together, but is Manchester about jamming 30 units into a building? Is that what we look like as a town? It's certainly not what we look like now as a town, and I think we can do a lot better. I think that sites that the town owns, 60 acres over by the airport, could we have green spaces for people? Could we have places for kids to ride bikes that are a part of this, and build a neighborhood? Build something that someone can barbecue, someone can, you know, let the kids ride bikes, have a playground, have a sandbox. I mean, this site, if you take that and divide it in half, you're at like 3/4 of an acre and 30 plus, I heard you say 30 plus units. It's just, I think it has to be about the people. And I think that thinking that through, that we can do better, we can design something that can be a model for other towns, and we can make something that people want to live in, and they don't feel that it's, you know, I don't get a lot of calls looking for an apartment. I will say that, your statement, you know, hits people, they want to have some green space and have that, and I just think that further consideration needs to go into that, because it's not a big box building in Burlington, and that's not our town.
So I can say that our apartments, we actually sometimes have to turn away applicants because they don't income qualify. People want to live in Shires housing. With anybody that's familiar and has seen it, it is highly desirable housing. And like I said, market rate people, sometimes we have to turn them away because we have the affordability limits that we do. So we give really dignified housing to people who need it. And another testament there is that we have no problem filling our units, especially here in Manchester.
Oh, I agree. I point people to your site all the time. And I think that, is a great need. Torrey Knoll's a great example. There actually is some green space, in there. But I'm talking about this other.
I think your point was made. I don't want to get a conversation just going back and forth. We don't have time for that. We still have a lengthy agenda ahead of us. So I thank you for your comments. Steve, very quickly.
Just one comment. Why would you all make a decision to put this facility in a flood zone when we just went through all this flooding and we're having a difficult time getting the state to back us to fix some of this stuff? Why would you put yourself in a position like that? You don't have to answer me, okay? But there's a real flood problem here, and we're going to put something else down there? Come on.
I'll address that, Steve. When this property was mentioned as being in a flood zone, when the original Depot Street project group was working on it a couple of years ago, that stuck with everybody. No one forgot that term, flood zone. It's in the 100-year floodplain, okay? It's not within the river corridor, okay? Because the NDA won't be approved within the river corridor. But FEMA kind of exacerbated the whole problem because they raised the level of the so-called flood surface 4 feet from what it was. So that created even more of a stir with people. The bottom line is I was there yesterday. Worst storm since Irene, possibly worse than Irene. I was there at the end of the day. There was no standing water anywhere on that entire property.
I was here in the 70s when we were swimming in water.
And it was draining right into the sewer. Sewers were not backed up. So I think, there's been a lot of talk on social media and other places about this floodplain problem, okay? It's a tempest in a teapot, all right? It's not a big deal.
But the bottom line is, it's in the flood zone.
There are a lot of building areas in the flood zone.
Exactly.
Steve and Phil?
And there shouldn't be.
Steve, your point was made. We heard it. We understand it. Phil, thank you for your answer.
I can reply just very briefly.
Okay.
I'm going to acknowledge that we will need to get a waiver under the current zoning to build in the 100-year floodplain. And we will hire an engineer. They will need to do an analysis that says if you put that building in that location, that it will not result in raising or increasing chances of flooding for anywhere in that area. That is a test that we will pass. That is the first question we are asking our engineers right now. So that will be borne out in the DRB process. So we will have to show that it meets the standards.
I mean, part of the problem is, as Matt alluded to earlier, every township in Vermont was built along next to a river. So almost all of our townships, town cores, are in a 100-year floodplain. Almost universal. So good.
I just wanted to make one point with that lady that talked about having something more like Torrey Knoll. Are you familiar with Torrey Knoll? That development on the first part of
That lady is Chrissy Grojo. Chrissy, that's Sylvia.
Oh, sorry. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you. I appreciate what he said. Are you familiar with Torrey Knoll? Housing?
Where are we headed with this, Sylvia?
Well, no, I just wanted her to realize that the kind of development that she thought would be suitable would be like Torrey Knoll. That's all.
I think that's a good illustration, yeah. Yeah, I think the point was well made, we heard it. I'm going to move along, because I think we've all said what we needed to say on this. And we just added, we added this evening a new agenda, item 8, which would be to listen to our Riverwalk people who are here patiently waiting to speak to us.
Thank you.
And I want to thank
should have had that go before us.
I know, I want to hear about
That's
that.
so true.
No, that's
Right, 'cause I gotta drive all the way down to Burlington.
Number one.
Thank you.
How long is
so
your
much.
presentation?
Thanks for all the great
2 minutes.
questions. and
2
just-
minutes, we're gonna stay.
One hand up on the Zoom. Thank you.
There's no guarantee.
Oh, Kyle.
Yeah, can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can now.
Okay. So my name is Kyle Murphy, I'm an architect, and many of you know me, I've grown up in Manchester. You all know, well, many of you know our work and you know what we stand for. We're the other respondent to the RFP. So I just want to kind of dovetail what Stephen had asked earlier and some of the other points in the room about this is an extraordinary opportunity we have on this site. And I would like to request the opportunity to come present our proposal to the select board. We put in about a year effort, more than a year, and I actually presented last summer. Lori and Heidi were on the call, and we shared the preliminary vision to which we then refined. We went to great effort to refine, to put in front of the task force as a response to the RFP. We're currently talking with several developers now, and that was the last that I had left with the task force. So I'm not looking to throw anybody under the bus. I'm a little confused how this recommendation was made, because we were never informed that this recommendation was being made. The last we had left it with the task force is that we were going to come back to them with basically some options for who our development partner would be and a financial plan. So I just want to respectfully ask that we have the chance to make the same presentation to the select board, because we really have an extraordinary vision for this site, and I think one that greatly elevates the possibilities for this site. And I'll be honest with you all, I'm really not interested in the site just from the standpoint of like having another project in our portfolio. This is about, to whoever was in the room that had made the point, we have a tremendous opportunity to do something that can be an example for all over the state and beyond. And with respect, I respect Shires, but I just do not feel that the design they put forth does anything to elevate that site. It's completely not what should be there. And we have a very exciting vision that we've been developing now for well over a year, that I really believe we can pull off. I'm actually meeting with the developer on Thursday to more thoroughly vet this, and then the goal was to come back to all of you with a more thorough proposal. So again, I offer this with great respect for everyone in the room. Not looking to, go after anybody in the task. I'm just confused that this recommendation was made and we were never even informed. Like, I made a special trip to come to Vermont to present to them. We went to great expense and time over about it was well over a year to put this together before the RFP even came out. So I just would like the opportunity for us to present our proposal to the select board, because I really feel it will be something great for the town.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kyle, for that. We will have an opportunity to talk about it. If that's it for now, I can't give you a response here today as far as how we got to this point, but I know there was a lot of discussion among the Housing Task Force and town staff, and also the town was going through a transition at that point, which with our management team, and some things might have slipped through the cracks, but I will need to talk to the staff member that's been particularly involved in this process to get your answer for you, and your request is a valid one from my perspective, so I will get an opportunity to discuss that and see what happens. And we will keep you in the loop as far as, we're not going to leave you out the cold as far as what any decisions may or may not be.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to mention it because it said something about an executive session tonight, so I just wanted it to be on your mind.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else on this particular subject? We'll move on to the new agenda, item 8, which is the Riverwalk. Thank you for your patience.
We'll be very brief. Margaret Donovan, President of the Manchester Riverwalk Board of Trustees, and we have a lot of board members and committee members here tonight to stand with us. And we have really just one one purpose. We want to remind the select board respectfully of the following. Whenever Riverwalk has been presented to the Manchester voters, it has been approved. Starting in 2010 with the transition to town Manchester, 2013, Manchester 2020 visioning exercises, the 2017 downtown strategic plan, and 2023 Manchester town meeting. We are not asking, just to reiterate this, we're not asking for any town money that would affect taxes. Although it is worth noting that the townwide reassessment has created a substantial increase in the grand list, which should provide some breathing room for the town. We raised over $470,000 from individuals and businesses and foundations. And we responded very promptly to the select board's request to go to the town. And in March 2023, the town voters approved 2-to-1 this expenditure. They recognize the benefits to the town. Now we're asking when we can expect to receive the up to $95,000 the town residents approved. This amounts to 10% of the construction costs, which have recently gone up because everything's gone up. So now really is 10%. And I'm pretty sure that if a federal program is offered for an infrastructure project that the town wants, the Fed covered 90% of the cost, and the town only had to put in 10%, they jumped on it. And that's what we're offering. Holding back the town's support is seriously hampering our ability to fundraise. Donors want to see that the town is genuinely committed. And the sooner the town jumps in, the sooner we can wrap this up. So we're here tonight to remind the select board that Riverwalk is a highly desired investment with long-term payback. While we would appreciate a commitment to a funding amount right now, at the very least, what we would like to have is a deadline soon, such as August 1st, when we will learn what the amount will be, even if the monies are not made available until construction starts.
So I guess I'm just a little confused.
Sure.
Because I think the idea was, the reason why it was a weird number up to 95,000 was that once you had our verbal commitment, the intention was that you would go do the fundraising and then we'd figure out what that up to number was when you've done the fundraising. So I think
that was never our understanding, really. We wanted the town to be committed, some amount.
Which we are.
We're trying to leave it open.
Yeah, the voters decided, so.
Right, but we can't, we don't have any, commitment to that. The voters said that, but the town is now saying up to $95,000 could be $1, right? Could be anything.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's not what we intend to.
I don't think the voters thought it was $1.
No, I know, I'm exaggerating a bit, but still, we would love to have a hard number so we could tell people, we could say the town is committed to this 10% of this bridge project, or whatever you decide.
We can get you an answer on that.
Thank you. We would love to also have a public statement.
I think that's a reasonable request.
Thank you. And a public statement affirming the town's support would be very helpful. And put out in the media. Does anybody else here have anything else to add?
Well, I just want to add, because I know we've had some conversations in Highgate. I know, speaking exactly to some conversations that we've had, repeating myself, that the town would step up at that moment to get us over the finish line. And obviously, we're encouraged by and heartened by the fact that you guys are willing to do that. I think what's more important for us is as we just got another estimate that increased the cost of this project, unfortunately. So the cost of this project is increased by about 12%. So it makes our job a little bit harder. We have a higher hurdle that we have to get across. And if we have a number, not a commitment to make the allocation now, but just a number, the town's in for this much. Instead of like, they're there to get us over the finish line at the end if we have X amount to close. More like we just have some town number that we can bring to our donors and say, look, they're in for 8%, they're in for 7%, they're in for 10%, whatever it is, that we can plug that into our equation. We have a number, and then we have like a gap that we need to close by October 31st, basically. We are all kind of at this point where we need to put an end to the fundraising process here and try to kind of reach some finality. And I think having some number from the select board will help us to get there. So it helps us understand what the gap is that we need to close, and also gives us a number that we can share with prospective donors that indicate that yes, the town has some skin in this, the businesses have skin in the game, our donors have skin in the game, and of course everyone else that wanted to see this has a vested interest in seeing that this project finally gets brought to completion. So
I committed and said, I think I can get the board to come up with a number. It will not be a percentage, as we can see percentages change
Sure.
the bottom line
I get it.
drastically. I think if we come up with a number, it'll be a number.
No, hard number.
And we'll have that discussion, and there will be some skin in the game.
People ask us now, how much more you have to raise, well, we don't even know how much we're getting.
I get that. Yes.
Has it been budgeted? Has this money been budgeted?
It was approved, it wouldn't have to be budgeted because it's not coming from property tax dollars. Depending on what the funding mechanism is, for instance, if it comes from CERC funds, that has to be approved by town meeting. If it comes from other sources that don't require town meeting approval, just require select board approval, then it can happen like that. The authorization is already there. It's not specific authorization because it's non-binding, but what we really want to do is take the temperature of the voters at town meeting and see if they were supportive. And it was by about a 2-to-1 margin. So it will not be CERC funding. It will not be property tax dollars, which kind of limits
Other option.
our options. Yeah. So that plays into what the final figure will be.
Well, I think before you decide the amount, you ought to get Scott to go back into the video of your meeting, because I was there, and that was the discussion of what Heidi said is that they were gonna raise the money, the select board, they were gonna tell us how much they raised and what they had left, and we were gonna do something. We didn't put an amount on it.
Well, there was a maximum number. Ultimately, it was discussed between Steve and the board. In the final article that was put forth to the voters at town meeting, there was an actual number. Up to. Yeah. Yes.
So I had heard that you said that the select board would come up with a number and let us know. And I'm sorry, my background's in project management, so I'm very date oriented. So what time frame would we know what that amount would be?
I wouldn't think it would take a long time to discuss that and come up with something. We have a lot on our plate this evening. It's not going to happen this evening. We could schedule an executive session at our next meeting, Dave. We're halfway through our extended hour right now. We still have a lot of ground to cover. So
don't expect an answer tonight.
Right. Oh, yeah, I was just
want to say a
saying
piece.
2 weeks, a month, that's all I was questioning.
exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, what used to be agenda item 8 is now 9. Possibility here to appoint Philip Warren as the forest fire warden, and Chris Howard as the fire warden assistant. Move second, all in favor say aye. Aye. Vote approved. Town manager.
No, cemetery.
Oh, cemetery, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just tonight, we're just looking for 2 changes, and then we're gonna review everything by November 1st, because that's when we looked at it last year. Right now, we had to hire a different contractor to do the area, and we had to increase the pay to cover that. So right now, we're paying them $800, and we're only getting there's no coverage of our costs. So we'd like to see that raised to like $1,100. And then when Jeff is called out on the weekend barrels, which I've been told that's where most of the barrels are, he's only been paid $300, so, we would like to see that raised to $450. Jeff gets 300 of that, sorry, he gets 175 now.
When was the last time you raised any rates on?
Last November 1st, a lot of them were raised, some were not, but most of them were raised.
Not by significant amount.
No, just minimum.
Is that a motion?
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to go forth and increase the cemetery rates.
Barrel rates would be 11.
Burials as proposed, as recommended by the town
I
manager.
recommended it to like that one.
Okay, and that's a second?
Yes.
Okay, moved, seconded, all in favor, say aye. Aye, that's approved.
We've added a new staff member, are we moving on to the next item?
Yes.
Okay.
That was actually part of the next item.
Okay. We have added a new staff member, he started Monday, actually, Caleb Parker, DPW staff. Looking forward to having him. He brings a lot of good experience. In fact, he has a CDL license too. And we're going to partner him a little bit with the Greg Park and develop him into a manager over there. So that's the goal, long term. Short term is going to start Monday and helping us with the cleanup on the play.
If you just want to spend just a very brief moment on the impact of the storm.
I was going to get to that next.
Okay.
You want me to just cover the tax rate?
Yeah, why don't we do that?
Okay. So we asked the state if it's possible to set the grand list before the grievance is completed. Knowing the situation we're in right now, with a lot of grievances to go through, the answer was no. So what we're looking at now, Gordon estimates finishing by July 21st. And by the way, the deadline to sign up for grievances is this Friday at 4:30. If you miss that, you're out of luck. So he estimates finishing by July 21st at the latest. We would then submit the grand list to the state. It takes 7 to 10 days to get the education rate set from them. And then we would have a special meeting and set the tax rate. It'd be another 2 or 3 days to get the bills out, and then 30 days later for the due date on the bills. So we're most likely looking at first Friday in October. And I'll be back to you at some point in the next couple of meetings to ask for that authority to be able to do that. Which you have the authority to do, even though the voters voted to set the date at a certain time. Oh, not flooding. Okay, so all the roads other than Rooteville are passable now. I'm sure a lot of you have stories and pictures and videos. Green Mountain Estates, I was walking down there in my sneakers, unfortunately, today. It was a menace. But generally, overall, we're in good shape. The water's gone down a lot in 24 hours. Road crew's working hard right now. Jeff saved Rooteville Road for at least 90% of it by getting Brent to park an excavator up there in the morning in case it came in needed, and it did. So they yanked the culvert out before the road was washed out and saved the road. Now we've got a damaged culvert that it wants to reinstall until the new one comes in, which is later this summer for installation. So we'll see how that goes.
Good job.
Yes, he did a great job of that. So other than that, we're working on general flooding issues. We get tons of phone calls about neighbors, neighbors flooding and things like that. And I'm going to be on vacation this week, just kind of FYI, but I can check every day.
Anything else that you want to report?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. Any other business from the board? If not, I'd like to enter into executive session.
And I move that we go to executive session for the discussion of real estate negotiations, the disclosure of which could for the town. That's a distinct disadvantage.
Second.
seconded, all in favor, say aye. Okay, we're gonna go into executive session. I'm gonna say at this point, there may be some action, when we come out, we're gonna keep the meeting, in order. And, there may or may not be action coming out.
Recording stopped.
What's on your mind, Dave?